Hi. If you are like most students, all you want to know right now is when you're going to get your Requiem papers back. And I understand that the first paper in a course is sort of a bellwether. So you want to know how you did and how I go about grading. So I'm going to try and get them done as soon as I can. I have two sections of this class, so there's about 50 of these papers to read, and I will get to them all just as soon as I can. Uh, Moving on, though, we're going from the biological perspective in the course to the psychological perspective, and we do that by moving into chapter 6. Carlo Di Clemente, the author, whose early work with smokers led to the development of the stages of change, is an important and useful tool in the assessment and ongoing treatment of substance abusers. In chapter 6, Di Clemente talks about what he calls self-change, by which he means the process that some substance abusers go through outside of treatment. They are not engaged in formal treatment. And this is an effort that they undertake to address their substance use. We know that a significant number of addicts achieve sobriety without going through treatment. And Di Clemente wants to look at why they can do this with no treatment, no self-help groups. His principal point here is that it doesn't mean that the addict doesn't do anything. Self-change is a phenomenon that includes, as he says, both a decisional process and a series of behavioral changes. The addict makes a decision that they're going to do something about their substance use, and then they make behavioral changes, either in environment or relationships or whatever it may be. He points out, importantly, that this is not the opposite of treatment, but rather self-change is what underlies all recovery. You know, we have the trite but true phrase that the addict needs to change, needs to want to change. And so that's what happens here. It's just that they make this change without the benefit of treatment. That's what he calls self-change. On page 91 of your textbook, quoting him here, treatment builds on self-change and has a reciprocal relationship with natural recovery. It is never treatment or self-change, but rather treatment and self-change. We have talked quite a bit about or I have anyway, the complexity of addiction and how there's no simple solutions here because it's a complex process, a lot of factors. Di Clemente addresses this. And he points out on page 82 that there's many factors that play a role in the evolution of a drug problem. Again, let me quote him. Genetic influences, family attitudes and behaviors related to uses of substances, relationship skills and social networks, ethnic and cultural values. All of these things come into play when a person is using substances and determine just how bad the problem might become. Di Clemente also reinforces here what we've discussed before, that multiple attempts at sobriety are necessary. It doesn't happen that easily. So patients are going to relapse and they have to go through treatment again. But he also points out for many self-changers, they do not necessarily reach sobriety, but rather they reduce their use. And this is the harm reduction model, controversial model, wherein some clinicians who adopt this philosophy argue that if they can get a substance abuser to lessen the amount of alcohol or other drugs that they are using, that is a success. That is a reasonable and acceptable goal. Perhaps it's a stepping stone to full sobriety at some point down the line. Maybe it's not. But the idea is that if you can reduce the level of use, you've accomplished something. You've lessened the harm that the person is placing themselves at. Again, it's a controversial idea, but Di Clemente points out that with a lot of self-changers, this is what happens. They reduce their use, particularly those who have alcohol problems. Obviously, if they reduce their use so that it's not causing personal, social, legal problems, it's a legal substance, and therefore they're in a much better place than they were before. Harm reduction with marijuana or cocaine is a little bit more controversial. In the end here on page 94, DiClemente suggests that his work and others serves to discredit four myths, and I want to quote this for you from page 94. Number one, the first myth, that substance abusers do not or cannot change. We've talked a lot about the moral judgments that people make about substance abusers, and that this is something that they can't stop. So, we just have to write them off. Well, that's the first myth that's discredited with his work. The second is that they cannot change on their own. That's what this chapter is all about, self-change. The third myth, he says, is discredited is that substance abusers are impervious to consequences and contingencies. In other words, they mean nothing to them. But in fact, self-changers are those that do see the consequences and do respond to them by making this change in their behavior. The fourth and last myth that he says is discredited by this work is that we in the field, the clinicians, cannot understand this process of recovery, that it's some sort of black box, and that people are just going to change and there's nothing we can do about it. We don't know when it's going to happen. So this is a good beginning to the 4 chapters that we have here in the psychological perspective section of the textbook. And this is perhaps more of what you figured you'd be getting in this psychology, quote unquote, psychology course. So I hope that you benefit from this chapter. And I will talk with you again soon. Take care.